Hello, chess family. It's me, National Master Jesse James, and today we're taking a look at another match set of games here. This time against a National Master, JBakker. I think I know who this is, but I'm not too sure. If anybody knows who this is, please let me know. We've been playing Elite Chess for quite a while together, and gosh, out of 29 games, it was 14.5 to 14.5. So I was pretty excited. I'd love to challenge him to a match, maybe do a 1 minute and 3 minute games. We'll see what happens. With that being said, let's take a look at a game where we get to play and. Yeah, we had a really good series of games. He's very aggressive. I'm very aggressive. Let's see how this first game goes. And this one I do get, I get lucky in this one. Here we go. In this one I'm playing the white pieces. So I'm playing the black pieces. Sorry. So e4, c5, knight c3, g6, bishop c4, bishop g7, d3, knight c6, knight e2, e6. It's a very interesting system that he plays for the Grand Prix. I believe this is like a Grand Prix attack. Usually I never really see the knight on e2 here. f4 typically gets placed first. Maybe this is more of like a close Sicilian. Either way, when you're playing against these kind of lines, it's best to go ahead and fianchetto as this adds extra protection to your king. Alright, castles happens, knight g7. I've always liked putting the knight here on e7 as it doesn't block the bishop, and we get to control this d4 square. Alright, bishop g5 got played, h6, bishop h4, g5. I guess I was feeling a little bit spicy that day and decided to kick that bishop back even further. Bishop to g3, looking at jumping on this nice d6 square. We can't allow that. Let's go. d5, e takes, bishop to b3. This is exactly what you want because, well, white was going for the king side attack, so we want to open up the center, and of course attack on the queen side. So, castles right here, pawn to f4, very good move by him. He's going ahead and trying to open up my king side, and, well, I don't want that to happen. Knight f5, I get a little bit greedy here, saying, well, I'll definitely look at taking this bishop pair, or maybe even getting this knight to e3 move in. And, well, this JBakker is definitely aggressive. Pawn takes on g5, knight to e3, allowing the fork just to go for this king side attack. Queen d2, knight takes on f1, rook takes on f1, and queen takes g5. Here already computer's giving an advantage for white here, and well, he doesn't disappoint. Bishop to f4, the only way to keep the advantage here. I am up the exchange, but look at white's pieces and look at my king. Oof, I've got to fight back. Queen h5, bishop takes d5, down a pawn. Knight d4, trying to get some trades in here as that will help me defend my position. Knight g3, again this is all computer moves mostly. Queen g6, knight to e4, and bishop b6. Bishop takes b7, winning a pawn. And rook b8. Here was definitely a blunder as well. Knight takes c5 as a move, and also bishop takes on b8. Well, he's not so nice to me. Bishop takes, rook takes, knight takes on c5. He's definitely back into a winning position here. But don't give up in your games. Keep fighting forward. Bishop g4, bishop to e4, queen to b6. A nice little move here, attacking the knight, but also threatening knight f3 check if this knight does move. Here he played pawn b4, and well, this just lets me win some material. So queen takes, rook takes, pawn c3, rook to b2, and knight to a4. A nice little trap there. Of course, if you take, bishop takes on d4 check, and well, you're just going to be winning back the exchange. And well, I got the bishop pair here. I'm down a pawn, but I have a very active game here. So here he went ahead and played knight to a4, attacking my rook. Makes sense. Rook takes on a2, a nice tempo attacking the knight back. Knight back to c5, knight e2 check, knight takes, bishop, bishop e2, and unfortunately this was the final blunder of the game. Black to move and win. Do you see it? Alright, hopefully you saw it. Of course, it's just the bishop takes c3 here, attacking the rook. The problem here is, though, the bishop to d4 check winning the knight is what was the threat. Here, rook c1, bishop d4 check, king has to go to h1, and after bishop takes c5, you realize you can't take back because the back rank checkmate. At this point, he went ahead and resigned. He had I have about 21 seconds, and he only had 7 seconds, so it's a pretty good time to throw in the towel. On to the next game. Bakker's going to be jumping on me pretty mean this time. Here we go ahead and start off, and I'm going to be playing the black pieces again. e4, c5, knight c3, g6, bishop c4, bishop g7, d3, knight c6, knight to e2. Here guarding on the d4 square. This is where black's trying to control, just to stop white from getting an overwhelming advantage in the center. e6 again, castles, knight e7, bishop g5, h6, bishop h4. This time I just went ahead and castled. Maybe that was the problem. Maybe I need to play this g5 move again. And here, well, storm the gates, f4, Queen b6. I definitely would like to play something like d5 here, but this bishop pin is just so annoying here. D5 is just losing. Pawn takes, and knight just takes on d5. Even bishop takes on d5 is another move there. Either way, that bishop hit was so annoying. Queen b6 was played, a4, and well, I must have been playing a little fast here. Maybe a little slow. I played pawn d6, not taking the pawn yet on b2. King h1, bishop d7, pawn 2 h3. I'm not sure what that move was up to. Maybe trying to build up a g4 in the future. a6, queen d2, and rook 88. The game's relatively about even here. I do like my position though. Rook to b1, knight to d4, hoping that some trades can happen because, well, after knight takes c takes d4, now I've got the open c file to attack down. Knight to e2, pawn to d5. I got to open up the position. Remember, your opponent's going for kingside attack, so open up the center whenever you can. Bishop takes on e7, a nice little move by him. Of course, over here, d5 was the idea, but now, well, it's not going to be defended anymore, and it's also attacking a rook. Rook takes, pawn takes, bishop takes. A pawn has been won. Funny enough, the computer still gives black an advantage here. I'm not too sure why, but here, Baker's going to kick it home pretty strong here. Rook over to e8, knight to g3, queen to d6, bishop back to b3. This is a very annoying bishop as it keeps putting pressure on this king. Pawn to h5, queen to f2, and rook to e3. Knight e4, queen e7, rook e1. A good idea, trying to make trades here. Rook takes, bishop c6, pawn f5. Oof. Now white's position is definitely definitely very strong here, as f6 is a strong threat, and also even just f takes on g6 here. Here I was not able to last long. Queen back to d8, pawn takes, rook f8. Bishop takes on f7 check, king h8. Now the queen just needs to get to the h file, and it's going to be game over here. Queen f5, queen h4. Nice little tempo off of the rook, but that only gives the tempo for it to be coming back. But Baker even finds a stronger move here. Can you find the best move here for white? Plus 34, 40 in the position. Can you find the move? White's a move and win. Here we found the beautiful pawn to g3, and my queen has nowhere to go. So once the queen gets to h5, it's just going to be checkmate. I went ahead and played bishop takes e4 check. He's happy. Rook takes e4, and now it was forced mate, and I just went ahead and resigned. Ugh. All right, he got me back. Let's get back after him. All right, in this game I'm playing with the white pieces. Pawn to e4. Finally, I get to play white. d4, bishop g7, knight c3, d6. Here we got like a perk going on over here. f4, I love my Austrian attack. It's a little too aggressive, which I like. Knight c6, d5, knight to d4, bishop e3, e5. Pawn takes, knight takes, queen to d2. Here I'm very happy with my position. I'm definitely saying I might be looking about castling queenside, and I got a really strong center here. But, JBaker's just doing really good about making counterplay. Knight to e7, knight to f3, castles, bishop c4, knight to c6. Here you can see that his knights are doing a good job, and bishop controlling this d4 square. Castles kingside, pawn to f5, and unfortunately this was a huge blunder just because he's putting himself into a pin. So let's go to work. Here, knight g5, putting pressure on the pin. Queen to e7 to defend. Rook to b1. As you can see, the idea is to take and go ahead and put more pressure with the rook down the file. And yeah, he just really can't get out of this one. h6, pawn takes. H takes, pawn takes. Yeah, he was able to not lose a piece, but with that being said, his kingside position is looking pretty shaky here too. Bishop takes on c3, almost forced here, as knight to d5 is just a very strong move, kicking away the queen, and yeah, there's going to be tactics against this king. So bishop takes is the computer's move too. You got to get rid of that knight. Queen takes, of course. I have the bishop pair, my beautiful queen, even a nice passed pawn over here. Yeah, he's not. The game will last a little bit longer, but I believe, maybe there was some chances here. G takes on f4, bishop f2, knight to e5, bishop b3, just playing it nice and simple. Bishop takes on e6. Wait a second, how did I get in such a bad position? I was up a piece, and now I feel like he's fought back. Uh-oh, white to move. Do you see it? Man, I'm surprised I can play this accurate even in a bullet game. With white to move here, I found the only move to hold the advantage. Hopefully you found it. Rook takes on e5 here. Remember, put pressure on the pins. Pawn takes, queen takes, rook to e8, and rook to e1. And well, only way to for black to survive this position, Bishop takes on b3. The game is so even in the game. It's just ridiculous. Queen takes, rook takes, bishop takes. Here we even have bishops of opposite color here. And rook takes on c7. I definitely have a better rook here, as this rook is not on the 7th rank over here, or 2nd rank attacking my pawns. Rook f7, of course trying to look for trades. If you want to keep the position to try and play for a win, best is to keep the rooks on the board. So rook c3, bishop to e4. Bishop takes on a7 now. I don't know how, but now I'm up an extra pawn. Bishop c6, bishop d4. Still plenty of chances to play for a win here, as this bishop is very strong, and you can see the dark squares are pretty weak over here. King h7, and here I missed the maiden 2, unfortunately. I went ahead and played pawn to h4, trying to grab onto the dark squares, but of course, hopefully you see the checkmate in 2. Yes, I missed rook h3 check, king to g8, rook to h8. That's what happens when you play these opposite colored bishops and you have a rook or a queen on the board. With opposite colored bishops, if the bishops are on the board, it's pretty much a draw at that point because it's really hard to play for a win because you can't control their squares. With that being said, when you have the rooks or the queens on the board, it makes it a very easy way, or it creates easy ways to play for a win because they can't control those squares. All right, let's continue this game. h4, bad move by me. King h6, rook to c5, rook to e5, king f2. This is pretty good for me that, well, this pawn is on a dark square. Rook to d7, pawn to c3. Of course, we don't want to move back here. We want to keep my pawns on dark squares. Rook to e7, bishop to e5, trying to target this pawn over here. Rook back to d7, and bishop just takes, even guarding the d2 square. Now I'm up too many pawns, and, well, let's go to work. King g7, g3, king to h7, pawn to b4. Rook to f7, pawn to b5, trying to keep pushing over here on the queen side. I have an extra pawn over here, I have an extra pawn over here. This is the antidote for creating a win with opposite colored bishops. You have to make 2 weaknesses to get 1 pawn across the board. One bishop will be able to stop it. Unfortunately, the other pawn, the king, has to try and stop it, and that's where you're able to win. Bishop d7, pawn to h5, trying to liquidate so I can get this extra pawn across the board. Bishop g4, and this was unfortunately a blunder. H takes, king takes, rook to g5 check, and now I was just able to win a piece here. And the rest of it is just a matter of technique, as they say. King to d3, rook to d7, pawn c5. Let's push these past pawns. Pawn c6, takes. And then the last blunder here, played the rook on a dark square bishop, but at this point, not too big a deal. I believe I had about, oh my gosh, wow. I had about 5 seconds left. He has about 2 seconds. And after rook check here, I was able to win the rook. All right, on to the next game. Here we go. And this one, well, I'm white again. Unfortunately, this does not work out for me against his modern or the perk. E4, G6, D4, Bishop, G7, pawn to C3, D6, F4, my Austrian attack again. Knight C6, E5. Probably played a little too fast here. Pawn to F6 here. I really like this move, just trying to open up the position here. He definitely has a lot of experience in these games. Knight takes an f6. Yeah, I'm really sad that I lost my spearhead here, but I really had no choice. If I didn't take, well then you can see all his pieces are really aimed to take back, and I'll just be the one down a pawn. So pawn takes, knight to f3, castles, bishop c4 check, pawn to e6. This pawn looks so weak, I would think I would be able to win this game. Computer does give a slight advantage for white, but again, he just knows how to play these positions. Castles, pawn to d5, bishop back to d3, knight to e7, queen to e1, knight to f5, bringing the knights over here to f5, looking to come onto this king side, and maybe even go to this knight square on e4. Knight d2, here comes my knights. a6, knight e5, c5, and here he does the right thing. d4 is the weakness, so you can try to put pressure on it, and that's exactly what he does. By making this pawn trade right here, d4 becomes weak. Alright, pawn takes, queen c7. g4 here, getting too aggressive. Queen takes c5 check, king to h1. Knight back to d6, again looking at that e4 square. I definitely feel like I'm down a piece here because my bishop and rook are not helping out. Again, very accurate play by my opponent. Knight f3, knight to e4 of course. I think this was the wrong knight. I think the f knight would have been a bit better here. With that being said, knight to e4 gets played, bishop e3, queen back to c7, bishop to d4. Here my pieces actually look pretty nice now because I was able to get the bishop out, which means the rook should be able to get in the game pretty good too. Bishop d7, queen to h4. I mean, here if I look at this, I feel very, very confident in this position. The fact that I lost this, It just does not make me happy. Bishop to b5, another very good move here, looking to make a trade as this light square bishop is one of my best attackers. I might have even thought about playing knight takes g6 here to get the bishop to g6, and again, h7 is the idea. Bishop takes because it was pretty much forced. Pawn takes on b5. Again, these double pawns are not going to be bad because, well, the rook just has its open file. Knight to g5 got played, and unfortunately, this was a bad mistake. I guess I pushed a little too hard here, and he plays the correct move here. Knight takes, pawn takes, and yeah, now he's just doing well. Knight e4, e5's lost. I have this weakness over here. My king is weak. What once was a good position is now a losing position, and he goes to work very nicely here. Knight f3, bishop takes, knight takes, queen to c4, king to g1, queen to d3, knight takes on e6, my final blunder of the game. Queen e3 check, king h1, knight f2 check. All these moves are just forced, and very, very nice play by him. Rook takes, knight back to d4, but it's already game over. Black to move in checkmate. Do you see it? All right, hopefully you spotted it. It was going to be queen e4 check, king g1, queen to g2. Sad Jesse James. All right, one more series of games, and that's going to be it. Again, we played 29 games, and it was a staggering or an amazing score of 14.5 to 14.5. All right, here we go. Baker's playing the white pieces this time. e4, c5, knight c3. He's going for his close Sicilian or Grand Prix kind of setup. e6, bishop c4, a6, a4, knight c6, d3, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop to e7. Here's one of the few times I do not fianchetto over here. Knight to e2, castles, pawn to d6, f4, rook to b8, knight to g3, bishop to d7, pawn to f5, and e5. This is both a good and a bad move. It tries to keep it close. Well, White has plenty of ideas to open up this king site with a good pawn storm, and even trying to remove this knight with this knight over here. All right, pawn h3 got played, knight to d4, bishop takes, knight to d5 here, attacking this bishop. Here we go, bishop g5, trying to keep the bishop pair here, which definitely not a good idea. Pawn c3, knight back to c6, queen g4. I need to push over here on the queen side. Oof, this game was 3 years ago, so I guess I'm not too surprised how inaccurate I was playing. King to h8, king to h1, f6, h4, bishop h6. Here I would think my king looks relatively safe, but again, I'm not pushing on b5 here. I need to create counterplay because he's just going to keep creating attacking chances on the king side. Queen h3, knight a5, bishop to a2, bishop c6. Again, I have no idea why I'm not taking on b5, and I have no playing b5. I have no idea why I'm not playing bishop takes a4, bishop c6, knight to e2, and here comes that pawn storm. Bishop takes g4, bishop d2, rook to g1, bishop c6, g5, bishop takes, pawn takes, rook to g2. Of course, if he took back, I would have gotten greedy and taken again and tried to play bishop h6 to hold the position. Here, pawn takes on h4, and this was not a very good move for me. Knight to g1, bishop f4, knight to f3, pawn to g5, and, well, nice move here. F takes on g6, of course. That g5 move is just terrible. Takes. Ugh, checkmating ideas only are in this position. Rook f6, knight f5 check, game over, bishop h6, and checkmate. Ugh, a very nice win here by JBakker. All right, last game over here. Here I get to play the white pieces, and here we go. e4, g6, d4, bishop g7, knight c3, d6, bishop e3, knight c6. This is the 150 attack, become popular, I believe it was in England, and the reason why it's called the 150 attack is because, well, the idea was that many people that were around that level of 150, it was like the club player attack. And it's a very easy attack. You go queen d2 and you can castle queenside, or you just kind of try and trade off your bishops over here. So, queen d2, pawn to e5. Again, he knows this idea. He's trying to control this d4 square. Knight to e2, takes, knight to e7, f3, bishop e6, castles, a6, and, well, I'll take the bishop pair here, why not? Knight takes, bishop c4, attacking the weak e6 pawn. Queen d7, bishop b3, castles, king b1, king b8. The game's about relatively even here. Knight e2, looking to put pressure on this e6 weakness. Pawn to d5, woof, looks like a target to me. Knight to f4, Pawn to g5, knight to h5. Things are starting to get a little bit messy here over on the queen side. You can see that the dark squares are becoming quite weak too. Bishop e5, bishop takes, pawn to d4, and well, let's just keep pushing forward here. Pawn f4 and knight to f6, queen back to c8, and rook to f1. Here, looking at this now, maybe e5 something I should have looked about playing, but rook f1 makes sense to me. Bishop c5, g4. I've got an extra pawn. What do you do with extra pawn? Typically, you can make a pass pawn. So let's push it. g4, knight g6, f5, pawn takes. Here I got two nice pass pawns over here. And here, hopefully you see the move. Knight to e5 was a blunder. Bishop to e6, and the queen's actually trapped here. So knight has to go to d7. Knight takes, rook takes. Queen to f4. There's no rush to take over here. I'll be taking pretty soon either way. Bishop d6, queen h4, bishop e5, and bishop f6. Takes, rook to d6, and here he's just so slippery he's able to get out of this nice little pin here. Pawn to e5, rook takes, pawn takes. This was like a +8 position, and I'm really impressed how he was able to bring the position back to a not so easy winning position. Rook e8, queen f7, and of course rook just takes, king h8, or I'm sorry, a7. Rook takes on e5, and man, again, white, it still says that white's doing good here, but I would have thought I would have had a good knockout blow, but his counterplay, or the way that he plays, is very, very accurate and really good at creating these attacking chances. Rook back to f1, rook to b5, queen c4, queen d8, rook to d1, rook b6, queen c5 here. Definitely, I like this pin on this rook because it can't move anymore. Queen d6, queen takes, pawn takes, rook f7. Now I feel a lot more confident with the double rooks here. But again, I would not have thought he would have made it to the endgame without losing material. At this point at knight e5, well, the game's pretty much over. I'll go ahead and play rook takes b7 as I was able to win on time here. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed that match. Hopefully, I'll be able to contact him. If you guys know who it is, please let me know. I'd love to see if I can set up a match. Maybe a 1 minute and 3 minute games. We'll see you in the next game.